Docket number 003, case file IGN, the Resident Evil game that must be shamed. I am Inkarnate, your Inquisitor General of the Mind's Eye, welcoming you back to the Mind's Eye Inquisition. On tap for tonight is a news network kicking up dirt and calling it smoke for the fire in a desperate pitch for relevancy. So, as your lead inspector on this case, if you heard it through the grapevine, it's my job to trim the hedges. In the event you weren't aware, two of the live streams I do is Mind Games, my playthrough of survival horror, and Mind's Eye Inquisition, my reaction videos to horror happenings. Well, every once in a while, I get to cross the streams and combine two segments of my channel into one. What have we here? Leave it to IGN to present me such an opportunity. So, it appears one of their editors caught a case of the proverbial bug up their keister. Now, you might be asking yourself, however, did an insect manage to make space in a body cavity that's currently occupied by this vlogger's own head? Well, let's listen in.
It's clear that moving forward chronologically will take Capcom's remakes into the series' weakest era, an era of gameplay and narrative decisions best left in the past. Resident Evil 5 simply can't be remade, at least not to the standards of Capcom's best work. All this is to say that a faithful remake of Resident Evil 5 would break Capcom's 7-year streak of brilliant survival horror games. But all of this doesn't account for Resident Evil 5's most notorious problem: racism.
Ah, I see the problem. This calls for a guest narrator.
Now, come on!
Let me handle this, bitch.
Now, obviously, this is that classic case of race praising for the sake of diversity. And believe me, we'll get to that. But did this filleting little shill refer to some imaginary 7-year hot streak of remakes that Resident Evil has been on?
Bitch, please! First we gonna rock, then we gonna roll, then we let it pop, don't let it go! X gon' give it to you.
RE3, or as I refer to it as RE3 Make, came out in 2020, and RE Village released the next year in 2021. So what the hell are you talking about? Because last time I checked, those games sucked. Moving on.
Set in a fictional West African country, Resident Evil 5's primary antagonists are black people.
Black people. In Africa? The hell you say? And are you sure that the primary antagonists aren't infected humans, not to mention Albert Wesker, a white man?
Yes, it's technically the Ouroboros virus that protagonist Chris Redfield is fighting, but the parasite's host is depicted as a nation of mobs and primitives who are violent even before their infection. Intentionally or not, Resident Evil 5 positions Africa as the Dark Continent, an uncivilized world harbouring a diseased population that needs gunning down via Western intervention in the name of global security.
Yeah, if you have to resort to such levels of exaggeration, I think it's plain to see that you're clearly projecting there, buddy boy. Take a gander at what it looks like when the demand for racism is greater than the supply on tap.
This insensitive treatment of people of colour was hotly debated even as early as Resident Evil 5's debut trailer.
Oh boy. I love how this soy boy tries to preempt any current day criticism by explaining that this was problematic even 15 years ago when the game released. Yeah, that's real cute, but if it was stupid then, this non-controversy is only exacerbated by modern outrage mobs. So, sorry, you're still reaching.
With writers such as Ngai Kroll and Stephen Totillo pointing out the game's uncomfortable post-colonial imagery.
Post-colonial. The decolonization of Africa started in Libya in the middle of the 1900s. Using phrases like post-colonial is a shallow attempt to sound smart. Has nothing to do with Resident Evil 5 and is a very deliberate play to sound sympathetic to the black plight while dealing with your own white guilt. But nah, really, that was a nice try. And oh yes, indeedy, Professor Inkarnate is giving you a geography and history lesson. So, you better pay your tuition, you dig?
But that was 2009, a time when race was apparently a debate rather than a reality. In the 2020s, in a post-Black Lives Matter world...
Oh, IGN, you pandering white knights. So, anyone remember when they were still trying their hardest to attempt
race was apparently a debate
appearing as
rather than a
though
reality? In the 2020s, in a post-Black Lives Matter world,
incapable of discerning between whenever racism is actually apparent, because I seem to recall them giving this this false praise too, of all things, Tarzan. Well, not false praise, criticism, referring to it as a play for the white savior, white savior, and yet they were the same people praising Daenerys Strongborn, defending the blonde bush every damn week that the Game of Thrones aired. Gee, I guess they only have a problem with liberators of brown people when it's someone guilty of possession of a Y chromosome. Gotta love that worship of the liberal white female. This is about as bad as a take as that YouTuber in Praise of Shadows had on Albert Wesker.
A eugenics-obsessed white supremacist who is trying to become God and might just have enough money to pull it off.
Yeah, you know, for being a geneticist, you really think the Resident Evil movies had any thought put into them, let alone concocting their arch nemesis to be a bigoted nationalist? Yeah, you giving them way too much credit on that one. Hey, now that X-Men 97 is back, was Mr. Sinister a white supremacist, you moron?
there is only one acceptable response to a white man shooting waves of Africans for an entire video game. No.
Post-BLM world. We're still riding this grift. I heard the same talking points in the lead up to the Candyman remake. Oh man, what will a new Candyman film be like in a post-Black Panther, post-Get Out world? Oh man, I'll tell you how. It'll be crap. Jesus, man, with the race baiting turned up to that level, maybe RE5 Remake should make a play for ESG approval. I hear that Sweet Baby Inc. is looking for work. And since when was race not a reality for black people? Oh, it only became a debate when white people decided to use that to pretend to care to curry favor? Ah, I see. So race only became a reality in the 2020s, and only when professional liars started chattering about it. Okay. With diversity lectures about race from the PC police, personally, I just feel like all that yammering does is distract from the actual fixable problems with RE5 that a remake can address. RE5 was, when the franchise, for me anyway, completed its adoration and fetish with
Resident
the Matrix.
Evil Village's titular location is effective.
Personally, I never understood it. I don't want to, and I don't think I ever will. It's not something that is of any particular interest of me. And I mean, seriously, the clothing, the kung fu. This is a zombie series bred from genetic experiments. Well, if you say so. Now, credit where it's due. IGN does mention the excess of action set pieces and open areas that are void of any tension, but that's undone with all its identity politics.
Resident Evil Village's titular location is effectively a giant manor. Its corridors are streets, and its rooms are houses. Resident Evil 5's stage-driven structure is simply inferior to this design. A modern recreation of it would only further highlight its flaws. You could argue that Resident Evil 5 is actually the Resident Evil most in need of a remake. A whole new environmental structure and scenario design that reins in the action and dials up the horror would bring it in line with Capcom's other remakes.
Now, this is the part of the stream I affectionately refer to as Explore the Lore. A proper remake of Resident Evil 5 would actually capitalize on the key ingredients which, spoiler alert, would have only been made possible through the African setting. What core components am I referring to? So glad you asked. Why, the marriage of African urban society with tribal culture. Let me explain. Resident Evil 5, being the next in line for retelling, presents a rather unique occasion where you can hybridize old world superstition with cutting edge science, where medicine makes monsters of men. The brilliance of the greatest 90s horror film, Candyman, not that trash from 2021, is that it relocated the traditional old dark castle to the modern metropolis as the housing project. The hapless villagers are now the residents of Kabini Green, struggling to make a living while surviving a local legend come to life. By combining old and new, the story based on Clive Barker's book was able to craft the urban Gothic. Similarly, by setting the story in Africa and maintaining the key ingredient of the indigenous tribe, you have the chance to unite classic voodoo lore with George Romero undead for a lethal combination of storytelling. A rare opportunity if you ask me, and folks, chance occasions like that don't come around every day. Imagine if the Aboriginal villagers speak of horrors from the wilderness and the sheer terror they experience when Umbrella brings nightmares to life by harnessing the human genetic code. And just like that, you can finally give the fanbase some setting to celebrate outside of its hometown, a nested lore to explore that escapes the first 3 games and moves the franchise beyond Raccoon City. And damn, after 25 years since the release of Nemesis, ain't that what fans have been waiting for? A setting and a story to celebrate away from the opening trilogy or part 4. And speaking of remakes and Nemesis, yo Capcom, if you want to retell one of the mainline sequels, why not remake RE3, because boy did that game blow chunks.
Resident Evil Village's titular location is effectively a giant manor. Its corridors, but there's only so many changes you can make until it's not a remake at all, but an entirely new game. And if you take Africa out of Resident Evil 5, is it Resident Evil 5 anymore? Even with a vastly improved, more sensitive take on the continent, perhaps one with a black protagonist and a more empathetic look at the outbreak, the experience would simply be too divorced from the original to hold the name Resident Evil 5.
So, IGN argues making RE5 more survival horror would make it less RE5. Okay? That's some pretty circular logic there, especially when you consider that what this publication is advocating for is a rewrite of the game. So, basically, while making the case that a change is needed, IGN wants to preemptively shut down any talk of alterations of RE5 that would improve the game, but keep the setting. Translation: IGN proposes that the only way RE5 can be remade is if it acquiesces to their virtue signaling. It can be salvaged, but only on their terms. That's some top-notch manipulation.
Capcom has given itself the freedom to do whatever it wants. I just hope it's not a remake of Resident Evil 5.
You gotta adore how much stock IGN puts into pretending to care about how insulting this game is. After all, you feckless hack reporters, if you hated this game so much, why did it get a glowing review from you? 9.0? Amazing? Look it up. My hope is that with the controversy surrounding Sweet Baby Inc., with the past indictment on gaming journalism that was Gamergate, combined with the consequences that has befallen Star Wars, Marvel, Disney, and Hollywood as a whole, that gamers respond in kind in order to shut down this latest infiltration of agenda-driven gaming consultants and shill media. On the one hand, I hope that, along with gaming journalism, that horror media coverage gets exposed as well. But, on the other hand, there's always the mind's eye to get that job done. Even though I've only broadcast one survival horror title this week, this has been my third live stream in a row covering scary games. This week I did my watch party of the Bray Wyatt horror documentary on Monday. Tuesday was my round 3 live stream of Alone in the Dark. Just yesterday, I started my narration of Alice Asylum. I'll be doing a 32-page review or recital of each of the chapters of all month long, which you can catch, if you're interested, you can catch this Monday coming up. So I'll be doing 32 pages per week, all April long, to round out the full 160-page plot. Today, obviously, I absolutely had to cover this IGN controversy. And tomorrow, be sure to catch me. I will be doing a Mind's Eye Theater of the Shudder exclusive Baghead. Why is the Mind's Eye Inquisition the place for heated debate? Because I ask the burning questions that inquiring minds want to know. If you're resigned to your fate, time to subscribe to your fears.
Warn your friends. Warn everyone.